Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation. Today I just wanted to take a trip down nostalgia lane and make a video talking about one of my biggest, bestest, and favorite models in my 40K collection, the Warlord Titan. So I was lucky to be able to obtain this Warlord Titan for very, very cheap, but it was a project. It took me a good year to get this thing fully ready to be put on a table. And I thought I'd make this video and maybe talk about some of my trip and how things happened and things that I learned along the way, and might be able to help other people out when they construct this model or other resin models from Forge World or even fine cast models, and seeing some of the ways of handling resin, because there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. So what is the Warlord Titan? Let's start with that. So you guys don't have to go flipping and check it online. I'll give you a rundown of its stats. For starters, it is 5,500 points. He is a big boy. He is 120 wounds with a toughness 9 and a 2-up save. The Warlord Titan is never going to see competitive play. He has a couple of special rules. Most of them are just basic vehicle rules with explodes and stuff like that. But the one that's super unique to him is his void shields. So basically, he has a 5-up invulnerable save. But anytime he fails a save, instead of taking damage to himself, he instead takes damage to the void shields. And he has 8 void shields on him. Each void shield has 3 points or wounds, if you would. And whenever he takes a hit, the damage goes to the void shield or one of those points first. If there's any damage that exceeds the 3 to the void shield, it is lost. So think of it almost as like this guy has 8 3-wound models hanging out on him that prevent him from taking damage. Once all 3 are removed, the void shield is said to collapse. And at the beginning of each command phase, any void shield that is reduced its original number of damage points, is restored back to 3 points. So that's one thing you might want to clarify with whoever you're playing this model with, and make sure that they see how they feel with it and how they want to run it. Because if you go down to 0 points, the void shield collapses. But nowhere in this does it say that the void shield cannot be turned back on, re-engaged. It just collapses. I'm on the fence on which way to go with it, because part of me says you're paying 5,500 points for this model, and I don't know how do you gauge it? There's nothing else in the game to really gauge that against for defensive purposes. I mean, he's almost the cost of 3 competitive tournament armies. So I would think that maybe it'd be okay to allow collapse void shields to come back up. But then again, that's 8 damage. That's 8 heavy damage hits that got to hit him and take those down before you can even start doing damage to him. Unless you start doing mortal wounds. Mortal wounds do not touch the void shields. They go right through and do damage to the guy. So, talked enough about what he is. Before we jump over into starting to construct him, the last piece of his stat line I want to bring up is when he explodes. When a Warlord Titan explodes, he has a radius of 4d6 inches. Now just look at the base size of this thing, like the leg size. That's going to be covering a lot of the board. And any units that are within 4d6 inches suffer 3d6 mortal wounds. Again, 550 point model, he's going to leave a crater when he explodes. So starting off with the actual, all the boxes and everything that I got for this thing. So the short story of obtaining this is that a friend of mine needed to move some Warhammer stuff very, very quickly. Basically, someone had passed away, and they were trying to salvage what they could. And I took the collection and was able to sell it really fast and get them a good amount of money for it. And in return, I was able to purchase the Warlord Titan for much cheaper than I would have gotten. Now, mind you, I did have him talk to a couple of people in the area, and he realized that the price he was selling it to me for was not actually that low. And also part of the deal was I would never sell it, and it would maintain in my collection, and that's where he stayed. So I got the Titan with the legs already assembled. kind of wish they weren't because I would have liked to spread out the basing of it to give it a wider stance, but it's okay. It's okay. I didn't have to build the legs, and there was a lot more work that needed to be done to this thing. Starting with the torso. This was my first experience with boiling resin. And I'll tell you, practice with it first. Fine cast sprues or some of the other Forge World models that are a bit cheaper. When I first went to boil the resin to get it to move, number one, I was surprised that touching the resin to that boiling hot water immediately made it malleable. And I was immediately able to start working with it, and it was fast. And then it dries fast, and it dries in place fast. Practice with another piece of something, a fine cast sprue or something first, because you see, first of all, the water does have to be boiling hot. You can't just use hot water. It's got to be boiling. And once you put that in there, it's like a spaghetti noodle. It's just going to go very, very flimsy, very quick. So you need to be ready for that. It's very easy to use and really malleable. One thing I did notice is that if you try to reboil the resin because it's not in the right place, it almost seems like it burns. So I recommend not doing that. And that's why I recommend practicing with something else first before you move on. So this was with the torso. And you'll also notice I have a toothbrush next to it. That's from washing it. Whenever you purchase a resin model from Forge World, make sure that you wash all of it with soap and water before assembly, because when you go to prime it, if you don't, there is chemicals in that for treating the resin that might still be on it and cause your paint, your primer, and everything else to get kind of spotty and not be smooth like you'd want it to be. So after I got the body assembled, I put the shoulder plates on to, I guess you call them shoulders, onto it. And like a kid in a candy store, I had to put it on the legs and see how tall this towering titan would really be. You can see with the Chromebook, my wife's Chromebook behind it, he's already starting to gain some size. I mean, he's sitting on our dining room table, and I wasn't allowed to keep him there very long, but enough time to take pictures of him. So next up is the Sunfire Plasma Gun. The Sunfire Plasma Cannon, sorry, call it a plasma gun because literally if you wanted to cosplay, this is a good starting point for a plasma gun for a cosplay costume. It just, look how big that thing is. So the Sunfire Plasma Gun, 72-inch range, D6 plus 6 shots at strength 12, -4, flat 5 damage, or you can overcharge it for strength 14, -4, flat 8 damage. That hit rolls of 1 will do 4 mortal wounds to you instead of the traditional 1. It's a big plasma cannon. It's huge. It's mean. It's everything you would expect it to be on a Warlord Titan, a massive gun that can just absolutely decimate some of the toughest tanks in the game. So I got the thing fully assembled and ready for painting. So I took them outside, put them on some cardboard, and primed them right in my front yard. I can't imagine what my neighbors were thinking. No one said anything to me. No one still has said anything to me, but I can't imagine that someone did look outside and really, really confused and maybe a little concerned at me painting a giant robot. But I got kids, so maybe they just looked past and were like, oh, he's building something for his sons. No, no, no. This is my toy. And for my toy, I had one of my buddies cut a piece of wood, and the work that he did with this piece of plywood to make this, or to make this into what it is, was amazing. He drew out around the feet. He cut in the divots for me. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. I just need to figure out better ways to secure him to the base of this and make him not just a little more secured with this thing, that I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do yet with it. Some things I thought about is terrain that I might be able to put around the feet going up just to hold it, that I can also remove. I got a couple ideas. I just have not had the time to get around to it yet, but it really is a beautiful piece, that base for this thing, that I can't wait to get finished. It'll look great under this model. So now this bad boy needs some guns. How do we attach these guns? Because if you go and super glue them on there, they're very, very heavy, and they will just fall off. And then over time, the super glue would give way. So what I did was I super glued some metal plates inside of the armature, and then drilled a hole in the top half of the gun where it would attach to the model and ran just a bar of magnets right through the middle. And so far, it's been holding really, really well, as you can see here with the volcano cannon. Real quick, that volcano cannon, since I'm running down the stats, it's 120-inch range, 3d3 shots, strength 20, neg 5, flat 12 damage. Yes, flat 12. I mean, again, this is on a Warlord Titan. If anything, I don't think it does enough damage. Yet, here is a model it could easily one-shot with that gun. 2 hits on him, and that's going to pop this little Imperial Knight. You can see the size comparison with him with the Warlord Titan. And his little baby brother, a Dreadnought, right at his feet. Just think about a Dreadnought in your collection and realize that this thing doesn't even go up past its like heels, really. I mean, I don't know what you'd call that, but the first pieces of shield armor around the ankle of this thing, that's where it is. So now that we got one gun attached, time to attach the second gun. Did it the exact same way, drilled right through, and was able to get them both on there with steel plates on the inside, as well as a bar of magnets through the middle. And it's still holding. I'm checking every once in a while. I'll probably have to re-secure the plates, maybe replace the magnets over time as they get weaker, but it's been holding strong, holding true, and hopefully I won't have to do too much work to this guy. So a little fun comparison video. I threw this picture in here because this is a funny little story. So this is my Warlord Titan next to a 2-year-old. And a funny little story about this. I brought my wife downstairs and I brought the kids because I wanted to show her, because now this was the first time that I had finished and actually got the guns on it. So it looked like a robot. It looked like a thing. And when she came downstairs, kids came downstairs, and I was getting ready to move the Warlord Titan on the ground, and I was going to take a picture of it next to my son. My wife looks at me and she's like, I'm really not that comfortable with him being down here on the floor with bare feet. And I looked at her. I was like, oh, you just don't want him on the floor with bare feet? She said, yeah. So easiest answer to me was I picked him up and put him on the table. And I can tell you, although his face is cut off, he had the saddest look of like, Dad, what are you doing to me? Why am I doing this? But here we go. He got a good size comparison that this thing is at slightly above waist level of a 2-year-old. Well, now that he's primed, the guns are attached, it's time to start going down the process with painting. So the first thing I did was I loaded up white into my airbrush and painted everything that I was going to paint white, but I did it with a granular effect to get a nice little shadow to it, as well as just kind of ran a light little bit of white over the whole model just to kind of make some of the details pop. I wanted to add a little bit of shadows into some of the spots that were really dark and recessed so that it would pop. Some of the detail in this model would pop and not just fall in the background because of black primer. And then I painted all of the armor plates white, as well as the faceplate on the head. And I only did the front parts of these, and then again did a gradial effect going out to the edges, and kept the center very, very bright because I was going to paint this another color. The head, I just put some tape down and covered up the top as best I could to just try and get the top faceplate on it. So I got the guns painted white as well, their armor plates, everything's situated, everything done, and ready to move on to the next step, which was an automotive-based teal. I found an automotive airbrush paint, as well as using my single action pache, which is like a tank. You can't clog these things. You get clogged, you just jam the button down, it comes spraying through. It's not good for detail work, but it's great when you're really trying to cover something large like a Warlord Titan and cover the armor plates easily. So I found this teal that was an automotive airbrush paint, and I was able to run it through my airbrush and still clean it, and everything's good. It still works to this day, but that was how I was able to obtain this teal and get that on there. Following of which, I went back through and hand painted all of the lines on things, such as the head here, and to get them to pop and kind of divide out the teal and separate the armor platings. And I guess you could say kind of framed the teal armor platings on this. And now that I've done this with all of the armor platings, it's time. I'm going to tell you straight, once I had the leg plates done and the knee plate and everything for the legs to go on it, you better believe I was gluing this on. I wasn't even done with the other set of plates for the rest of the body of this thing, and I just wanted to put it together. Once I had the head done, one thing I did before I went too crazy on painting the top half of it is I drilled a hole directly in the center and put a very thick steel beam in the back of the head. So the head just sits in there nicely, and I'm able to take the head off when I transport this thing for easy move. And if you notice, if you look inside those two arm cavities where the guns are currently out, you can see the steel plate that I cut and rounded out to put in there for the magnets to be able to stick in. Also in the back corner, you can see the top plates that I was working on and still need a little more work to before I could put them on. Now, as far as the torso for this thing, if you've ever painted a watermelon in your lap, that's basically what I compare this thing to. Moving that thing around and trying to repaint the black lines on there, as well as just dry brushing silver onto this thing to give it a little more of a metallic feel. Man, that was a horrible experience. I was so afraid that I was going to accidentally like press this thing in or drop it off my lap and it was going to just crack like a watermelon would do if it just dropped off your lap onto the cement and onto pavement. So I finished up the rest of the shoulder pads, the shields for insignias, and the whole top half of this thing. And man, this thing looks like a giant umbrella. I was talking with a couple buddies, and I thought a good campaign game would be to actually take the arms off of this and just have it as a giant walking shield. That everything underneath that got a invuln and was protected by this thing, or maybe protected by this thing's void shields and everything about it. Because man, it just looks like a giant walking umbrella. A little bit of a top-down view for you because this thing has so much detail. Sorry, the picture's a little fuzzy, but it gives you just you can see how much detail really goes into this thing and how intricate they are with it. How they really pay attention to like where the beams should be and how to support the weight of this thing. So the shoulder pads, I painted those separately. As you can see, I got the middle plates that are white still, and I maintain those white. And then I went in and hand painted the eagle and all the insignias and everything to make sure that you can see on the top too as well, the like cathedral-esque windows on the back of it. I went through and did highlighted those with black to make them pop, and that was so scary. I was so afraid I was going to drop this thing multiple times. As well, you can see that there's a second little piece that goes above the head, so that also helps hide how the head's positioned into it, which it sits with the beam in there. It sits right up against it. I got the plates attached underneath for the torso, which were really all the plates attaching onto this thing were done really, really, really easy. It was just a matter of figuring out which plates needed to go on which side into which place. And it all fit together so nicely, surprisingly. Like it wasn't a, a really like challenging, like holding them in place and everything. Everything really did attach together very, very well. It's just a large, large model. So now it's time with the shoulder plates on to put the guns on because you know me, like being a little kid, I got to see what it looks like. So I got the guns on there. I only needed one plate to finish, which was the one for the Belarus the Bellicoso volcano cannon. But I still needed to highlight and run trim on the guns themselves, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to build my big robot and sit there and stare at it and go, "You're so pretty. You're a giant big robot." But over a short amount of time, I did get them motivated to complete this. I did a little bit of teal to the front of the gun to make the plasma gun have a little bit of a difference over the volcano, and got the plate finished. And here he is on a standard, what we play on now, standard Warhammer 40K table. As you can see by the blue tape to make my mat just a little bit smaller. On his base over here, we have Drago at his feet, so you can see how massive he is again. And he's walking behind a Land Raider. So you really can see how just giant this model is. And I finished up his apocalypse launchers, which those are one thing I want to talk to you about real quick. So the apocalypse launcher has these little warheads on it. What I did with these guys was I rubber band these two things together flat so that they were easily standing up straight at all times, just so I didn't have them accidentally fall over because of the little afterburner things in the back, the little ventilation ports. And each one of those warheads is like a little teardrop that has to be glued in individually. And they don't sit in there all neat and nice and straight up and down. So you got to be paying attention. You got to pay attention to where they're going, how they're going in there. One thing you could do if you wanted to invest the time to guarantee it, you could probably drill a hole in the center and run a small pin and then drill a hole straight down and put them in there. But I still think you might be at a risk of skewing it when you drill in. And it might be best just to glue them in one at a time, as I did, and just eye them up. So they were that was probably the most time consuming and tedious part of this build was the apocalypse missile launchers. But other than that, everything else was actually fun to build, and it was really really fun to watch as this thing came together and just became a huge robot. I did get to use this thing twice. I don't have any pictures from the first time I used it because it was just kind of, I took it over to a friend's house just to kind of show it off and show how big it was and how much work I put into it. And we threw a game down for it where they put 5,500 points of other big stuff up against him. And sadly, he didn't do too well. His place is in games like this giant apocalypse game that I played out at the game shop. And my buddy, Steve, he is orc guy and a half. He brought so many. I think he had like 8 stampas at this thing, and that me and him were able to get into a fight and hitting each other and shooting across lanes and stuff like that. And in this picture, you can see I got the guardsman just standing in front of me, just protecting me from a charge. Because I mean, I can walk out of combat, but why not? It was fun later on in the game when I actually did move him for the first time, because most of it I just stood still and shot. But then when I actually went to move him to get closer um, to a monolith, I was like, wait, oh yeah, that's right, it can move. Yeah, no, it's not just a standing web platform. He is a walker and he can kick stuff. So yeah, man, it was a fun game. He survived all the way till the end. They chose to not go after him. We had a mission to secure the center, and so they chose to leave him alone and focus on the rest of the armies and just let him do his thing, because they looked at it like, if we put shots into it, we're going to have to shoot everything at this guy to take him down. So that's my experience with my Warlord Titan. He is a big, beautiful beast. I love that he's in my collection. I look forward to hopefully this summer getting a chance to get him into another Apocalypse game here soon. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you haven't. Leave your questions and comments down below. I can try and answer them best I can if it's questions, especially questions about constructing Forge World models and using resin models or Warlord Titan, any of those things. Please, I love reading them, and I try to respond to all your guys' comments. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.